Hey guys, welcome to Tech Notebook. This is the first video in the Tech Notebook DIY Smart Home series. In this series, we will be covering how to set up a smart home from scratch, using Raspberry Pis, ESP8266 devices, and much more. In this video, we will be covering how to set up an MQTT server on a Raspberry Pi. MQTT stands for Message Queue Telemetry Transport. It operates on a publish-subscribe principle similar to YouTube. There's a client device, which in our example is a lamp, and there's a host device, which in this example is your phone. In the middle, there is a broker or MQTT server. In order for the phone to turn on the lamp, the phone needs to publish a message to a topic on the server, while the lamp needs to subscribe to that topic on the server to receive the message. Okay, so to set up the server, we need a Raspberry Pi. I will be using a Raspberry Pi 3A+. You will also need an SD card and a computer. We first need to start off by flashing Raspbian onto the Raspberry Pi. To do this, I will be using the Raspberry Pi Imager, which will be linked down in the description below. Then, you will need to open up the SD card folder in your file manager. Inside the folder, you will need to add two files, wpa_supplicant.conf and an empty SSH file. If you want to know more about this, I will link a tutorial in the iCard above. The SSH file and the Wi-Fi supplicant file will be linked below in the description. We will need to modify the wpa_supplicant.conf file to include our SSID and password for our Wi-Fi network. Now we can insert the SD card and power on the Raspberry Pi. After you wait for around 5 minutes, you need to open up an SSH window and connect to the Raspberry Pi, using the default hostname Raspberry Pi in all lowercase. The default username is Pi and the default password is Raspberry. We can now install the MQTT server. The server we will be using for this tutorial is called Mosquitto. It is an open source MQTT broker which can be hosted on the Raspberry Pi. The way we install it is by entering this command: sudo apt-get install Mosquitto. And yes, there are two T's in Mosquitto. This will take about a minute and a half to install. Now we need to test out our server to make sure it works. But first, we need to get the IP address of the Raspberry Pi. The way we do that is by using the command hostname --I. This will return an IP address which we will need in a bit. We first need to install a Python module before we can write our test code. This module is called paho-mqtt, and we need to install it on our computer. The way we do it is by typing in pip install paho-mqtt. This will allow us to publish and subscribe to messages on our MQTT server. To test the server, I wrote a few programs in Python to publish and receive messages. The way you access them is by going to the GitHub link in the description and downloading the files. The only thing that you will need to modify is the IP address. You'll need to replace the IP address text with your actual IP address. Now you need to run them. You first need to run the receive script and then the send script. Once you run both, if you look over at the terminal for the receive script, you can see that it is printing the messages that it gets from the server. So if this worked for you, you've successfully set up an MQTT server on a Raspberry Pi. If you're looking for something else to watch, maybe check out my headless Raspberry Pi setup video, which will be the first link in the description below. With that said, that's the end of this video. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.